Hello and welcome to Photographica Podcast. This is a podcast devoted to photography. It's about photographers, it's about their work, and it's about what they love doing and how they do it. I'm Alex Schneiderman. I'm a printer and photographer of some 20 years standing. My website, asprinting.net, is a great way to get in touch with me about any printing you might need. I'd like to thank Chad Lalong for the music that you hear on this podcast, and you can get in touch with Chad through his Twitter at Chad Lalong. That's ChadLelong. Remember, you can get in touch with me, Alex Schneiderman, through my website, asprinting.net, and I'd love to hear from you if you've got any suggestions or comments, or you'd like to discuss having some of your work printed. Thanks for listening, and on with the show. Hello there and welcome to Photographica. I just wanted to record a special episode devoted to a trip I recently did to the Calais migrant camp known as the Jungle. It was conceived by me a couple of weeks ago when I became aware of the fact that there were several children in the migrant camps, both the Calais camp and at Grand Sainte near Dunkirk, and unaccompanied children who somehow had made their way, how I have absolutely no idea, to northern France, to the very edge of the continent, where for some reason they felt that they would be better off looking for a place to live in the UK. So I just couldn't believe this. I thought, I'm not usually a news photographer. I do documentary work, but I'm not a news photographer. But I thought this was beyond the news. I thought this was something that really needed to be examined from a human perspective. And so I called a friend of mine, Tom Blass, who's a writer, and suggested that we make a date to do an exploratory trip and to see where that would take us. We set a date and we left Dover one morning last week in early March. Very cold it was too, and made our way across the channel very easily to this extraordinary place that is in the process of being cleared by the CRS. That's the sort of French version of our riot squad, and they are brutal. I mean, they are taking this camp to bits. And if I could just explain to you what exists in Calais at the moment, and in fact talking to you as I am now about a week after I went, much of what I saw will have been dismantled and cleared. Calais migrant camp is a camp made unofficially by migrants hoping to reach the UK, and Calais had a migrant camp there for some 10 or more years. It used to be in Sangatte, it was moved from there, and now it exists on an old landfill site on the, I suppose, northern eastern edge of the town. And this place, it has assumed some sort of normality. There are some 7,000 people living there by estimation only, and there are kitchens and restaurants and healthcare and schools and playgrounds for children, and all of this built by volunteers out of rudimentary materials, pallets, wood, tarpaulins. I even saw a solar array powering a bank of pretty old computers, but that were being used to teach people in the ways of computer technology. I mean, this place is, like all human things, developing a culture of its own, which the French are systematically destroying and providing a very, very irksome alternative in the way of these containers without windows, which migrants will have to give biometric data up to gain access to, and this will restrict their ability to move in the future. So some are taking it up, but I think many are very reluctant to and are holding out for an opportunity to cross the channel. Anyway, back to the photography aspect of this, because I think it's interesting what you can do with a camera and an idea. This idea, as I said earlier, about crossing the channel and seeing what was happening on the very edges of the UK. If it weren't for 22-mile sea gap, this would be happening in the UK. And if it weren't for a treaty known as the Touquet Treaty, signed by the last Labour government in 2003, I believe, whereby the UK border force is stationed in France at the ferry ports, and Belgium for that matter, and so this means that no migrants can cross the channel on a ferry or train without going through border checks in France or Belgium. This is why there's a camp two main camps in France, because our border force are are on French soil. Without that treaty, those migrants would very likely be in the UK, and whatever side of the argument you're on there, it would appear to me to be some kind of outsourcing of our responsibilities to refugees, that we allow the French to not run the camp but to contain the camp in the way that they deem fit, with our financial support and backing. It was into this sort of unknown territory that Tom and I ventured a week ago, and we, on arriving at the camp, which typically Tom and I, who are the most chaotic travelling companions, and we've been travelling together for years and years, and something always happens which at the time will make you furious and later will make you laugh. But, I mean, we have had too many scrapes, and I'm not going to go into them here. But on this occasion, the two things which threatened to scupper the day were, one was our inability to actually find the camp, driving around as we did for some time before we actually got there, in a sort of myopic, chaotic way. But much more importantly, both of us have press passes, and neither of us had our press passes on the day. And this really, really could have ended the day, because I spoke to a CRS officer about getting into the camp, and they said emphatically that if we were found inside the camp without press accreditation or press passes, we would be arrested, and that would be the best of it. The worst of it, he intimated with his hands, meaning something like violence. It was pretty scary, and these guys look like Robocops. They've got sort of armadillo plating on their legs and shoulders, and visors and batons and shields and so forth. They don't mess around. They're not restrained in the way that many British cops are. They are quite they are quite happy to get involved, to be violent. I've seen them in Paris working a group of Algerians over once, and they really, really take no prisoners in a sense. So that was we felt a sense of despair at this point, and we'd come all this way and had nothing to show for it. We'd have nothing to show for it. We could always come back with our press passes. We felt despondent that we'd been so chaotic, and that this whole thing had been for nothing. But as we hung around, we decided that we'd just take a little wander over to where a earth bank had been made by the bulldozers that had been clearing the camp, and we found ourselves sort of just calmly strolling across, and then we found ourselves sort of calmly climbing up the earth bank, and then we found ourselves on top of the earth bank, and then the next thing you know, we were down inside the camp. Hey presto, we hadn't been spotted, we were in, and we were immediately confronted by a little island of non-destruction in the shape of a school that had been created both as a playground for the children and as a language learning centre for migrants who wanted to learn French and English, and a computer station which many people could use to Skype their relatives and learn computer skills. These, remember, are 95% of the people in the camp are young men. There are very few women and children there, but so much of the facilities that have been built by volunteers are aimed at young men. But this place seemed to have everything covered. It had a playground with climbing apparatus and so forth. It was just amazing. But all around it was nothing. It had just been cleared. I mean, when I say nothing, there was detritus everywhere. But this was the area that had been cleared the day before. So this was something that we hadn't really expected to see, which was to be on the other side of the bulldozers. And we talked to people who were there, some of whom had been there for 6 months, and we talked to the volunteers who were in charge of the centre, and they had a stay of execution, so to speak, for 3 or 4 days. And speaking to you as I am now, which is on the Tuesday, the 15th of March, we were there a week ago, and by the time that I'm talking to you, that area will have been bulldozed if it wasn't already dismantled and moved to another part of the camp. And this seems to be the stated aim of the CRS, which is to make life as unpleasant as possible for the people in there. So we got Tom got talking to people, I got photographing, and in the moment that I pulled the camera up to my eye and started to shoot, I had the sensation that that what I was seeing and what I thought was necessary to photograph was not the thing that I'd come to photograph, which was children, which, as I think you might agree, might be quite problematic in showing the images of children to a wider world. It's something I would still like to look into doing, but not without the help and under the auspices of some agency, recognized charity or so forth. And so I started photographing the things that were left behind, the things that the bulldozers had left behind and the fires had left behind where the huts had been set on fire. And it was a very moving experience to see how the people picking through the rubble of what was left and the waste and the senseless destruction that had gone on in a highly civilized, democratic, liberal, socialist, as it stands, country such as France. And I immediately zoned in on details, these little things left behind, which kind of reminded me of the negative space between things. I didn't want to photograph people so much because I didn't want to get involved in identifying the possibility of having somebody identified at close range. I mean, clearly in one of the pictures, this being my first visit, I decided that I would stick to the artifacts of destruction, of refugee chaos, and so forth. And with my Canon 5D Mark II and the bog standard 28-105 lens, I moved around the area of the camp, taking pictures of these things that I found, which I found incredibly moving. The whole experience was overwhelming for me, and it led to a sort of a zone of photography, which I guess you get into occasionally, where you're in a situation which is quite alien to you, but through the medium of photography, you find a way of making sense of it. And it was in this zone that I existed for how long, I have no idea. I wasn't looking at my watch, and I don't know where I was. I didn't take a huge number of pictures, but I took enough. And suddenly, I became aware of a group of CRS officers, and one of them was pointing at us. And to my horror, I realized that the CRS, by a crazy fluke, because there are over 300 in the camp, working to, on protecting the bulldozers from demonstrating migrants, that the one that I had spoken to, who had specifically warned us against going in, had spotted us. And my heart sank, and I thought we were in really big trouble. I motioned to Tom what was happening, and he doesn't speak French, but I do. He hadn't really been party to the initial discussion, and so didn't realise what the situation was. I think because I spoke French, and because I had spoken to the CRS officer like he was a human being, he decided that he was not going to bring the full force of the law as he saw it down on us. He was very stern. He brusquely marched us out of the camp, and all of a sudden we moved from one world into another, and left to consider what we'd just seen. And it was some time before I could look at the pictures. I mean, normally you look at pictures straight away, but I decided that I would look at the pictures. Well, I didn't decide. I just didn't want to look at them for another day. And because in the end, what I had photographed was the artifacts of human misery, the artifacts of sort of being stateless, of not knowing who you are, where you are, and what's going to happen to you. There's no question that the people that I photographed or didn't photograph or met were intelligent, cultured people on the whole, and left living like animals. And the camera must be the only tool which can communicate human to human this sort of situation. Eventually, back in London, and a good day later, I decided to look at the pictures, and they immediately sort of assured me that the trip had been worthwhile, because they still affected me as I went through them. I've put up a selection on my website at alexschneiderman.net. That's ALEXSCHNEIDEMAN.net, and the links will be in the program notes to this podcast. You can have a look then. Tom and I will be going back in early April, and this time with press cards, and hopefully with problem-free access in and out of the camp as much as we require. And I'm also hoping to visit the Grand Sant camp in Dunkirk at the same time, and in a bid to see what we humans can do to other humans in the name of democracy, in the name of justice, as you call it, and show the world, as far as possible, what our society is looking like in this time of great migration. We will see how this all turns out. We'll see if this is the greatest thing that's happened to Europe since the Second World War, which I suspect it is. And I want to look at it through the medium, or make sense of it through a medium that I know best, which is photography. And Tom is there; he's a writer. He'll be using, words to describe what he sees, and together, hopefully, we'll come to some sort of understanding of this huge event in European history. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this particular visit, and if I think there's something interesting to add to this after our next trip, I will certainly report through the medium of Photographica and fill you in on what took place and any photographic thoughts that arise from it. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and look out for future Photographica podcasts. Remember, you can always get in touch with me at the Photographica website through asprinting.net. That's asprinting.net. Please let me know your comments, any thoughts. I'm always happy to talk. Thanks for listening. Speak to you soon.